Hey Poppy, how you doing? Well, I've got I've got Mr. Timothy pulled up on my second computer so I can make sure everything's going okay. I mean, what? I don't know that man. What are you talking about? Yeah, I didn't see anything. What do you mean? So, yeah, we'll start. I'll start actually reading 9:25, 9:30, depending on how long it takes people to filter in. But I figured I could start a little bit early and give some people some time. Oh, thank you, Stream Elements. That's very kind of you. I'm doing good. I was in your stream today, Poppy, as well as Beans. It's a good time. Now is, of course, my chance to start up a Stardew Valley farm so that we've got all three of us with three different farms to play on. Anything for you, Poppy. I don't know why I was so like just seeing the the little go live button. I don't know why that made me so nervous. Like normally I don't care about public speaking. Yes, Bean. Whatever you want. Support our favorite mod. Am I? Am I your favorite? I mean, how many actually? I don't actually know how many mods that you have, Bean. You've got Snuggle and Poppy and myself. Before we uh before we start, okay, thanks, Bean. Before we start, I do want to ask, how many of you have read The Great Gatsby already and are just going to re-listen to it? And also, before we start, how many of you, I forgot my question already. Thinking, I had a second question. I had a second question. I'll remember it eventually. Indeed, lost a Malady stream. And everybody's stuck with my voice. What a shame. What a shame, what a shame. Oh, right, I am gonna grab some some water before we start. I meant to grab my water bottle before, but I forgot. So I will be right back. And being for future reference, this is how you use a BRB screen. I know that you're not very good at it, so I'm free to demonstrate. Bean, you know I had to. It's important, okay. And Poppy, sorry about that. I can Poppy, how do you do the how do you do the name? Is that let's try that. Alright, now let's see if this works. Nope, it didn't. That's not how you do it. Alright, well, we'll just hide that for now. Poppy, do you know how to do it? Do you want to tell me, like, now-ish? Good enough. Thanks, Poppy. Uh, how should I word this, then? Forgot I watched a video. Alright, excellent. I will make sure to also watch a video at some point. How's that, Poppy? I remembered my second question while I was grabbing. I owe you 6 coin. Oh, you better believe it. You owe me way more than 6 coin at this point. What time is it? 9:28. Alright. Well, what was I gonna say? Right. Everybody can hear me okay? I want to check sound quality. And there's not too much background noise. Like I said, I've got the second computer up and running right next to me, which can get kinda loud. Timothy Chalamet says you owe 15 Dune coin. As soon as I get my hands on 15 Dune coin, I will make sure to donate my 15 Dune coin to him. Everybody else also owes Tim 15 Dune coin, by the way, so you better pay up within the stream or bad things happen. He'll come for you. So a few more minutes, 2 more minutes ish, 1 more minute, and we'll start actually in on the book. Oh, you did spell his name wrong. Yeah, it's Timothy. Double E. I wouldn't know from personal experience how to spell Tim's name or anything, but make sure to spell it right in the future, or you'll get. Well, he'll come for you for that too. Hey, message. Glad you could come. So we are because Bean specifically requested it, so I'm glad she was able to come. We're gonna start with The Great Gatsby, actually, and also on the reading list, I have the original Dracula by Bram Stoker, and I think also I've got the Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. So you can check my reading list by using the command reading list. I think that works. Yes, they're both there. Excellent. And you can check which book I'm currently reading, though it should be in the title, by typing in current book. Nope, that's not how you spell that. Current book, I think, or maybe just current. Yes, current book. There we go. So I will make sure to be keeping track of those for as long as I can. But that is 9:30. Well, for me at least. I don't know what all time zones you guys are in, but 9:30 for me. I hope I'm not too far from bedtime for you guys. Bedtime stories don't help much if you get half an hour of reading in and then you go do something again. But The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Yes, yes, Bean. I'll make sure to get to it. I won't be interacting with chat as much as I'm reading. Might be every chapter, probably not every page, but I'll make sure to look back. The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald. Then wear the golden hat, if that will move her. If you can bounce high, bounce on her, bounce for her, too, till she cry lover, gold-hatted, high-bouncing lover, I must have you. Thomas Park d'Invilliers. Once again, to Zelda. Chapter 1. In my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, he told me, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages that you've had. He didn't say any more, but we've always been unusually communicative in a reserved way, and I understood that he meant a great deal more than that. In consequence, I'm inclined to reserve all judgments, a habit that has opened up many curious natures to me, and also made me the victim of not a few veteran bores. The abnormal mind is quick to detect and attach itself to this quality when it appears in a normal person, and so it came about that in college I was unjustly accused of being a politician, because I was privy to the secret griefs of wild, unknown men. Most of the confidences were unsought. Frequently I have feigned sleep, preoccupation, or a hostile levity when I realized by some unmistakable sign that an intimate revelation was quivering on the horizon. For the intimate revelations of young men, or at least the terms in which they express them, are usually plagiaristic and marred by obvious suppressions. Reserving judgments is a matter of infinite hope. I am still a little afraid of missing something if I forget that, as my father snobbishly suggested, and I snobbishly repeat, a sense of fundamental decencies is parcelled out unequally at birth. And, after boasting this way of my tolerance, I come to the admission that it has a limit. Conduct may be founded on the hard rock or wet marshes, but after a certain point I don't care what it's founded on. When I came back from the East last autumn, I felt that I wanted the world to be in uniform and at a sort of moral attention forever. I wanted no more riotous excursions with privileged glimpses into the human heart. Only Gatsby, the man who gives his name to this book, was exempt from my reaction. Gatsby, who represented everything for which I have an unaffected scorn. If personality is an unbroken series of of successful gestures, then there was something gorgeous about him, some heightened sensitivity to the promises of life, as if he related to one of those intricate machines that register earthquakes 10,000 miles away. This responsiveness had nothing to do with that flabby impressionability which is dignified under the name of the creative temperament. It was an extraordinary gift for hope, a romantic readiness such as I have never found again in any other person, and which is not likely I shall ever find again. No, Gatsby turned out all right at the end. It was what preyed on Gatsby, what foul dust floated in the wake of his dreams, that temporarily closed out my interest in the abortive sorrows and short-winded elations of men. My family have been prominent, well-to-do in this middle western city for 3 generations. The Carraways are something of a clan, and we have a tradition that we're descended from the Dukes of Buccleuch, but the actual founder of my line was my grandfather's brother, who came here in '51, sent a substitute to the Civil War, and started the wholesale hardware business that my father carries on today. I never saw this great-uncle, but I'm supposed to look like him, with special reference to the rather hard-boiled painting that hangs in father's office. I graduated from New Haven in 1915, just a quarter of a century after my father, and a little later I participated in that delayed Teutonic migration known as the Great War. I enjoyed the counter raid so thoroughly that I came back restless. Instead of being the warm center of the world, the Middle West now seemed like the ragged edge of the universe. So I decided to go east and learn the bond business. Everybody I knew was in the bond business, so I supposed it could support one more single man. All my aunts and uncles talked it over as if they were choosing a prep school for me, and finally said, "Why, yes," with very grave, hesitant faces. Father agreed to finance me for a year, and after various delays I came east permanently, I thought, in the spring of '22. The practical thing was to find rooms in the city, but it was a warm season, and I had just left a country of wide lawns and friendly trees, so when a young man in the office suggested that we take a house together in a commuting town, it sounded like a great idea. He found the house, a weather-beaten cardboard bungalow, at 80 a month, but at the last minute the firm ordered him to Washington, and I went out to the country alone. I had a dog, at least I had him for a few days until he ran away, and an old Dodge and a Finnish woman who made my bed and cooked breakfast and muttered Finnish wisdom to herself over the electric stove. It was lonely for a day or so until one morning some man who more recently arrived than I stopped me on the road. "How do you get to West Egg Village?" he asked helplessly. I told him, and as I moved on I was lonely no longer. I was a guide, a pathfinder, an original settler. He had casually conferred on me the freedom of the neighborhood. And so, with sunshine and the great bursts of leaves growing on the trees, just as things grow fast in movies, I had that familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer. There was so much to read, for one thing, and so much fine health to be pulled down and out of the young breathing air. I bought a dozen volumes on banking and credit and investment securities, and they stood on my shelf in red and gold like new money on the mint, promising to unfold the shining secrets that only Midas and Morgan and Maecenas knew. And I had the high intention of reading many other books besides. I was rather literary in college. One year I wrote a series of very solemn and obvious editorials for the Yale News, and now I was going to bring back all such things into my life and become again the most limited of all specialists, the well-rounded man. This isn't just an epigram. Life is much more successfully looked at from a single window, after all. It was a matter of chance that I should have rented a house in one of the strangest communities in North America. It was on the slender riotous island which extends itself due east of New York, and where there are, among other natural curiosities, two unusual formations of land. 20 miles from the city, a pair of enormous eggs, identical in contour and separated only by a courtesy bay, jut out into the most domesticated body of salt water in the Western Hemisphere, the great wet barnyard of Long Island Sound. They are not perfect ovals. Like the egg in the Columbus story, they are both crushed flat at the contact end, but their physical resemblance must be the source of perpetual confusion to the gulls that fly overhead. To the wingless, a more arresting phenomenon is their dissimilarity in every particular except shape and size. I lived in West Egg, the less fashionable of the two, although this is a most superficial tag to express the bizarre and not a little sinister contrast between them. My house was at the very tip of the egg, only 50 yards from the Sound, and squeezed between two huge places that rented for 12 or 15,000 a season. The one on my right was a colossal affair by any standard. It was a factual imitation of some Hotel de Ville in Normandy, with a tower on one side, spanking new under a thin beard of raw ivy, and a marble swimming pool, and more than 40 acres of lawn and garden. It was Gatsby's mansion. Or rather, as I didn't know Mr. Gatsby, it was a mansion, inhabited by a gentleman of that name. My own house was an eyesore, but it was a small eyesore, and it had been overlooked, so I had a view of the water, a partial view of my neighbor's lawn, and the consoling proximity of millionaires, all for $80 a month. Across the courtesy bay were the white palaces of fashionable East Egg glittered along the water, and the history of the summer really begins on the evening I drove over there to have dinner with the Tom Buchanans. Daisy was my second cousin once removed, and I'd known Tom in college, and just after the war I'd spent 2 days with them in Chicago. Her husband, among various physical accomplishments, had been one of the most powerful ends that ever played football at New Haven, a national figure in a way, one of those men who reach such an acute limited excellence at 21 that everything afterward savors of anticlimax. His family were enormously wealthy. Even in college, his freedom with money was a matter for reproach. But now he'd left Chicago and come east in a fashion that rather took your breath away. For instance, he'd brought down a string of polo ponies from Lake Forest. It was hard to realize that a man in my own generation was wealthy enough to do that. Why they came to the East, I don't know. They had spent a year in France for no particular reason, and then drifted here and there unrestfully wherever people played polo and were rich together. This was a permanent move, said Daisy over the telephone, but I didn't believe it. I had no sight into Daisy's heart, but I felt that Tom would drift on forever, seeking, a little wistfully, for the dramatic turbulence of some irrevocable football game. And so it happened that on a warm, windy evening I drove over to West Egg to see two old friends whom I scarcely knew at all. Their house was even more elaborate than I expected, a cheerful red and white Georgian colonial mansion overlooking the bay. The lawn started at the beach and ran toward the front door for a quarter of a mile, jumping over sundials and brick walls and burning gardens. Finally, when it reached the house drifting up the side in bright vines, as though from the momentum of its run. The front was broken by a line of French windows, glowing now with reflected gold and wide open to the warm, windy afternoon. And Tom Buchanan in riding clothes was standing with his legs apart on the front porch. He had changed since his New Haven years. Now he was a sturdy, straw-haired man of 30, with a rather hard mouth and a supercilious manner. The two shining, arrogant eyes had established dominance over his face and gave him the appearance of always aggressively leaning forwards. Not even the effeminate swank of his riding clothes could hide the enormous power of that body. He seemed to fill those glistening boots till he strained the top lacing, and you could see a great pack of muscle shifting when his shoulder moved under his thin coat. It was a body capable of enormous leverage, a cruel body. His speaking voice, a gruff, husky tenor, added to the impression of fractiousness he conveyed. There was a touch of paternal contempt in it even towards the people he liked, and there were men at New Haven who had hated his guts. "Now, don't think my opinion on these matters is final," he seemed to say, "just because I'm stronger and more of a man than you are. We were in the same senior society, and while we were never intimate, I always had the impression that he improved of me and wanted me to like him with some harsh, defiant wistfulness of his own. We talked a few minutes on the sunny porch. "I've got a nice place here," he said, his eyes flashing about restlessly. Turning me around by one arm, he moved a broad, flat hand along the front vista, including in its sweeping a sunken Italian garden, a half-acre of deep, pungent roses, and a snub-nosed motorboat that bumped the tide offshore. It belonged to Domain, the oil man. He turned around again, politely and abruptly. "We'll go inside." We walked through a high hallway into a bright rosy-colored space, fragilely bound into the house by French windows on either side. The windows were ajar and gleaming white against the fresh grass outside that seemed to grow a little way into the house. A breeze blew through the room, blew the curtains in at one end and out the other like pale flags, twisting them up towards the frosted wedding cake of a ceiling, and then rippling over the wine-colored rug, making a shadow on it as the wind does on the sea. The only completely stationary object in the room was an enormous couch on which two young women were buoyed up as though upon an anchored balloon. They were both in white, and their dresses were rippling and fluttering as if they had just been blown back in after a short flight around the house. I must have stood for a few moments listening to the wind and snap of the curtains and the groan of a picture on the wall. Then there was a boom as Tom Buchanan shut the rear windows, and the caught wind died out about the room, and the curtains and the rugs and the two young women ballooned slowly to the floor. The younger of the two was a stranger to me. She was extended full length at her end of the divan, completely emotionless, with her chin raised a little, as if she were balancing something on it which was quite likely to fall. If she saw me out of the corner of her eyes, she gave no hint of it. Indeed, I was almost surprised into murmuring an apology for having disturbed her by coming in. The other girl, Daisy, made an attempt to rise. She leaned slightly forwards with a conscientious expression. Then she laughed, an absurd, charming little laugh, and I laughed too, and came forward into the room. "I'm paralyzed with happiness." She laughed again, as if she said something very witty, and held my hand for a moment, looking up into my face, promising that there was no one in the world she so much wanted to see. That was a way she had. She hinted in a murmur that the surname of the balancing girl was Baker. I've heard it said that Daisy's murmur was only to make people lean towards her, an irrelevant criticism that made it no less charming. At any rate, Miss Baker's lips fluttered, and she nodded to me almost imperceptibly, and then quickly tipped her head back again. The object she was balancing had obviously tottered a little and given her something of a fright. Again a sort of apology rose to my lips. Almost any exhibition of complete self-sufficiency draws a stunned tribute from me. I looked back at my cousin, who began to ask me questions in her low, thrilling voice. It was the kind of voice that the ear follows up and down, as if each speech is an arrangement of notes that will never be played again. Her face was sad and lovely, with bright things in it, bright eyes, and a bright, passionate mouth, but there was an excitement in her voice that men who cared for her found difficult to forget, a singing compulsion, a whispered "Listen," and a promise that she had done gay, exciting things just a while since, and there were gay, exciting things hovering in the next hour. I told her how I had stopped off in Chicago for a day on my way east, and how a dozen people had sent their love through me. "Do they miss me?" she cried ecstatically. "Oh, the whole town is desolate. All the cars have the left rear wheel painted black as a mourning wreath, and there's a persistent wail all night along the North Shore. How gorgeous! Let's go back, Tom, tomorrow." Then she added irrelevantly, "You ought to see the baby." "I'd like to." "She's asleep. She's 3 years old. Haven't you ever seen her?" "Never." "Well, you ought to see her. She's—" Tom Buchanan, who had been hovering restlessly about the room, stopped and rested his hand on my shoulder. "What are you doing, Nick?" "I'm a bondman." "Who with?" I told him. "I've never heard of them," he remarked decisively. This annoyed me. "You will," I answered shortly. "You will if you stay in the East." "Oh, I'll stay in the East, don't you worry," he said, glancing at Daisy and then back at me as if he were alerting for something more. "I'd be a goddamned fool to live anywhere else." At this point Miss Baker said, "Absolutely," with such suddenness that I started. It was the first word she had uttered since I came into the room. Evidently it surprised her as much as it did me, for she yawned, and after a series of rapid, deft movements, stood up into the room. "I'm stiff," she complained. "I've been lying on that sofa for as long as I can remember." "Don't look at me," Daisy retorted. "I've been trying to get you to go to New York all afternoon." "No, thanks," said Miss Baker to the 4 cocktails just in from the pantry. "I'm absolutely in training." Her host looked at her incredulously. "You are?" He downed his drink as if it were a drop in the bottom of the glass. How you ever get anything done is beyond me." I looked at Miss Baker, wondering what it was that she got done. I enjoyed looking at her. She was a slender, small-breasted girl, with an erect carriage which she accentuated by throwing her body backwards at the shoulders, like a young cadet. Her gray, sun-straining eyes looked back at me with polite reciprocal curiosity out of a wan, charming, discontented face. It occurred to me now that if I had seen her, or pictured her somewhere before— "You live in West Egg," she remarked contemptuously. "I know somebody there." "I don't know a single—" "You must know Gatsby." "Gatsby?" demanded Daisy. "What Gatsby?" Before I could reply that he was my neighbor, dinner was announced. Wedging his tense arm imperatively under mine, Tom Buchanan compelled me from the room as though he were moving a checker to another square. Slenderly, languidly, their hands set lightly on their hips, the 2 young women preceded us out into a rosy-colored porch open towards the sunset, where 4 candles flickered on the table in the diminishing wind. "Why candles?" objected Daisy, frowning. She snapped them out with her fingers. "In 2 weeks it'll be the longest day of the year." She looked at us all radiantly. "Do you always watch for the longest day of the year and then miss it? I always watch for the longest day of the year and then miss it." "We ought to plan something," yawned Miss Baker, sitting down at the table as if she were getting into bed. "All right," said Daisy. "What'll we plan?" She turned to me helplessly. "What do people plan?" Before I could answer, her eyes fastened with an odd expression on her little finger. "Look!" she complained. "I hurt it." We all looked. The knuckle was black and blue. "You did it, Tom," she said accusingly. "I know you didn't mean to, but you did it. That's what I get for marrying a brute of a man, a great, big, hulking, physical specimen of a—" "I hate the word hulking," objected Tom crossly, "even in kidding." "Hulking," insisted Daisy. Sometimes she and Miss Baker talked at once, unobtrusively, and with a bantering inconsequence that was never quite chatter, that was as cool as their white dresses and their impersonal eyes in the absence of all desire. They were here, and they accepted Tom and me, making only polite, pleasant effort to entertain or to be entertained. They knew that presently dinner would be over, and a little later in the evening, too, would be over and casually put away. It was sharply different from the West, where an evening was hurried from phase to phase towards its close in a continually disappointing anticipation, or else in a near nervous dread of the moment itself. You make me feel uncivilized, Daisy, I confessed on my second glass of corky but rather impressive claret. Can't you talk about crops or something? I meant nothing in particular at this remark, but it was taken up in unexpected ways. Civilization's going to pieces, broke out Tom violently. I've gotten to be a terrible pessimist about things. Have you read The Rise of the Colored Empires by this man Goddard? Why, no, I answered, rather surprised by his tone. Well, it's a fine book, and everybody ought to read it. The idea is that if we don't look out, the white race will be utterly submerged. It's all scientific, and it's been proven. Tom's getting very profound, said Daisy, with an expression of unthoughtful sadness. He reads deep books with long words in them. What was that word that we— Well, these books are all scientific, insisted Tom, glancing at her patiently. This fellow has worked out the whole thing. It's up to us, who are the dominant race, to watch out, or these other races will have control of things. We've got to beat them down, whispered Daisy, winking ferociously towards the fervent sun. You ought to live in California, began Miss Baker, but Tom interrupted her by shifting heavily in his chair. This idea that we're Nordics, I am, and you are, and after an infinitesimal hesitation he included Daisy with a slight nod, and she winked at me again, and we've produced all the things that make civilization, oh, science and art and all that. Do you see? There was something pathetic in his concentration, as if his complacency, more acute of an old, was not enough of him any more, when, almost immediately, the telephone rang inside, and the butler left the porch. Daisy seized upon the momentary interruption and leaned towards me. "I'll tell you a family secret," she whispered enthusiastically. "It's about the butler's nose. Do you want to hear about the butler's nose?" "Why, that's why I came over tonight." "Well, he wasn't always a butler. He used to be the silver polisher for some people in New York that had a silver service for 200 people. He had to polish it from morning till night until finally it began to affect his nose." "Things went from bad to worse," suggested Miss Baker. "Yes, things went from bad to worse until finally he had to give up his position." For a moment the last sunshine fell with romantic affection upon her glowing face. Her voice compelled me forwards breathlessly as I listened. Then the glow faded, each light deserting her with lingering regret, like children leaving a pleasant street at dusk. The butler came back and murmured something close to Tom's ear, whereupon Tom frowned, pushed back his chair, and without a word went inside. As if his absence quickened something within her, Daisy leaned forwards again, her voice glowing and singing. "I love to see you at my table, Nick. You remind me of a rose, an absolute rose, doesn't he?" She turned to Miss Baker for confirmation. "An absolute rose." This was untrue. I am not even faintly like a rose. She was only extemporizing, but a stirring warmth flowed from her, as if her voice was trying to come out to you, concealed in one of those breathless, thrilling words. Then suddenly she threw her napkin on the table and excused herself and went into the house. Miss Baker and I exchanged a short glance consciously devoid of meaning. I was about to speak when she sat up alertly and said "Shh" in a warning voice. A subdued, impassioned murmur was audible in the room beyond, and Miss Baker leaned forward unashamed, trying to hear. The murmur trembled on the verge of coherence, sank down, mounted excitedly, and then ceased altogether. "This Mr. Gatsby you spoke of is my neighbor," I said. "Don't talk. I want to hear what happens." "Is something happening?" I inquired innocently. "You mean you don't know?" said Miss Baker, honestly surprised. "I thought everybody knew." "I don't." "Why," she said hesitantly, "Tom's got some women in New York." "Got some women?" I repeated blankly. Miss Baker nodded. "She might have the decency not to telephone him at dinner time, don't you think?" Almost before I had grasped her meaning, there was the flutter of a dress and a crunch of leather boots, and Tom and Daisy were back at the table. "It couldn't be helped," cried Daisy with tense gaiety. She sat down, glancing searchingly at Miss Baker and then at me, and continued, "I looked outdoors for a minute, and it's very romantic outdoors. There's a bird on the lawn, and I think it must be a nightingale come over from on the Cunard or White Star line. He's singing her voice sang. "It's romantic, isn't it, Tom?" "Very romantic," he said, and then miserably to me, "If it's light enough after dinner, I want to take you down to the stables." The telephone rang inside, startlingly, and as Disney shook her head decisively at Tom, the subject of the stables, in fact all subjects, vanished into the air. Among the broken fragments of the last 5 minutes at table, I remembered the candles being lit again pointlessly, and I was conscious of wanting to look squarely at every one, and yet to avoid all eyes. I couldn't guess what Daisy and Tom were thinking, but I doubted but I doubt if even Miss Baker, who seemed to have mastered a certain hearty skepticism, was able to put this fifth guest's shrill metal lick urgency out of her mind. To a certain temperament, the situation might have seemed intriguing. My own instinct was to telephone immediately for the police. The horses, needless to say, were never mentioned again. Tom and Miss Baker, with several feet of twilight between them, strolled back into the library as if to a vigil beside a perfectly tangible body, while, trying to look pleasantly interested and a little deaf, I followed Daisy round a chain of connecting verandas to the porch in front. In its deep gloom, we sat down side by side on the wicker settee. Okay, I gotta take a drink. Give me a minute. Glad you could tune in, Snuggle, even if you have to listen from work. Yes, Bean, what a man. How are we doing, lads? Anything? Nothing. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. What time is it now? Really? Oh, it's almost 10 already. I'll be reading far after, I guess. What a shame. I do intend to finish a chapter each night. If I have to go over the until 10 p.m. time, then so be it. Another drink of water, and then I'll start up again. I hope I'm not making really loud water noises. I can avoid doing that in the future if I am. Daisy took her face in her hands as if feeling its lovely shape, and her eyes moved gradually out into the velvet dusk. Oh, you like it. That doesn't make me feel better, Poppy. Where's my spot? Yes. Thank you, Bean. Oh, Bean, I must remember to mod you and Poppy when I get the chance, in case we get any of them viewers selling bots popping into stream. Do remind me at the end of stream if I do forget. Daisy took her face in her hands as if feeling its lovely shape, and her eyes moved gradually out into the velvet dusk. I saw what turbulent emotions possessed her, so I asked what I thought would become sedative questions about her little girl. "We don't know each other very well, Nick," she said suddenly. "Even if we are cousins, you didn't come to my wedding." "I wasn't back from the war." "That's true." She hesitated. "Well, I've had a very bad time, Nick, and I'm pretty cynical about everything." Evidently she had reason to be. I waited, but she didn't say any more, and after a moment I returned rather feebly to the subject of her daughter. "I suppose she talks, and eats, and everything?" "Oh, yes." She looked at me absently. "Listen, Nick, let me tell you what I said when she was born. Would you like to hear?" "Very much." It'll show you how I've gotten to feel about things. Well, she was less than an hour old, and Tom was God knows where. I woke up out of the ether with an utterly abandoned feeling, and asked the nurse right away if it was a boy or a girl. She told me it was a girl, and so I turned my head and wept. "All right," I said. "I'm glad it's a girl, and I hope she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl can be in this world, a beautiful little fool. You see, I think everything's terrible anyhow," she went on in a convinced way. "Everybody thinks so, the most advanced people. And I know. I've been everywhere, and seen everything, and done everything." Her eyes flashed around her in a defiant way, rather like Tom's, and she laughed with a thrilling scorn. "Sophisticated! God, I'm sophisticated!" The instant her voice broke off, ceasing to compel my attention, my belief, I felt the basic insincerity of what she had said. It made me uneasy, as though the whole evening had been a trick of some sort to exact a contributory emotion from me. I waited, and, sure enough, in a moment she looked at me with an absolute smirk on her lovely face, as if she had asserted her membership in a rather high, distinguished secret society to which she and Tom had belonged. Inside, the crimson room bloomed with light. Tom and Miss Baker sat on either end of the long couch, and she read aloud to him from the Saturday Evening Post, the words, murmurous and uninflected, running together in a soothing tune. The lamplight, bright on his boots and dull as the autumn yellow leaf of her hair, glinted along the paper as she turned a page with a flutter of slender muscles in her arms. When we came in, as she held us silent for a moment with a lifted hand. "To be continued," she said, tossing the magazine on the table, "in our very next issue." Her body asserted itself with a restless movement of her knee, and she stood up. "10 o'clock," she remarked, apparently finding the time on the ceiling. "Time for this good girl to go to bed." "Jordan's going to play in the tournament tomorrow," explained Daisy, "over at Westchester." "Oh, you're Jordan Baker." I knew now why her face was familiar. Its pleasing, contemptuous expression had looked out at me from many rotographer pictures of the sporting life in Asheville and Hot Springs and Palm Beach. I had heard some story of her too, a critical, unpleasant story, but what it was I had forgotten long ago. "Good night," she said softly. "Wake me at 8, won't you?" "If you'll get up." "I will. Good night, Mr. Carraway. See you anon." "Of course you will," confirmed Daisy. "In fact, I think I'll arrange a marriage. Come over often, Nick, and I'll sort of, fling you two together, you know, lock you up accidentally in linen closets, push you out in boat to sea, and all that sort of thing." "Good night," called Miss Baker from the stairs. "I haven't heard a word." "She's a nice girl," said Tom after a moment. "They oughtn't let her run around this country this way." "Who oughtn't to?" inquired Daisy coldly. "Her family." "Her family is one aunt about 1,000 years old. Besides, Nick's going to look after you, aren't you, Nick? She'll spend lots of weekends out here this summer. I think the home influence will be good for her." Daisy and Tom looked at each other for a moment in silence. "Is she from New York?" I asked quickly. "From Louisville. Our white girlhood was passed together there. Our beautiful white—" "Did you give Nick a little heart-to-heart talk on the veranda?" demanded Tom suddenly. "Did I?" She looked at me. "I can't seem to remember, but I think we talked about the Nordic race. Yes, I'm sure we did. It sort of crept up on us, and the first thing you know—" "Don't believe everything you hear, Nick," he advised me. I said lightly that I had heard nothing at all, and a few minutes later I got up to go home. They came to the door with me and stood side by side in a cheerful square of light. As I started my motor, Daisy peremptorily called, "Wait! I forgot to ask you something, and it's important. We heard you were engaged to a girl out west." "That's right," corroborated Tom kindly. "We heard that you were engaged." "Ah, it's a lie, Belle. I am too poor." "But we heard it," insisted Daisy, surprising me by opening up again in a flower-like way. "We heard it from 3 people, so it must be true." Of course, I knew what they were referring to, but I wasn't even vaguely engaged. The fact that gossip had published the banns was one of the reasons I had come East. You can't stop going with an old friend on account of rumors, and, on the other hand, I had no intention of being rumored into marriage. Their interest rather touched me, made them less remotely rich. Nevertheless, I was confused and a little disgusted as I drove away. It seemed to me that the thing for Daisy to do was rush out of the house, child in arms, but apparently there were no such intentions in her head. As for Tom, the fact that he had some women in New York was really less surprising than that he had been depressed by a book. Something was making him nibble on the edge of stale ideas, as if his sturdy physical egotism no longer nourished his peremptory heart. Already it was a deep summer on roadhouse roofs and in front of wayside garages, where new red gas pumps set out in pools of light, and when I reached my estate at West Egg I ran the car into its shed and sat for a while on an abandoned grass roller in the yard. The wind had blown off, leaving a loud, bright night with wings beating in the trees, and a persistent organ sound at the full bellows of the earth blew across frogs full of life. The silhouette of a moving cat wavered across the moonlight, and turning my head to watch it, I saw that I was not alone. 50 feet away a figure had emerged from the shadow of my neighbor's mansion, and was standing with his hands in his pockets regarding the silver pepper of the stars. Something in his leisurely movements, and the secure position of his feet upon the lawn, suggested that it was Mr. Gatsby himself, come out to determine what share was his of our local heavens. I decided to call him. Miss Baker had mentioned him at dinner, and that would do for an introduction. But I didn't call him, for he gave a sudden intimation that he was content to be alone. He stretched out his arms towards the dark water in a curious way, and, far as I was from him, I could have sworn he was trembling. Involuntarily I glanced seaward, and distinguished nothing except a single green light, minute and far away, that might have been the end of a dock. When I looked once more for Gatsby, he had vanished, and I was alone again in the unquiet darkness. Alright, what time is it? 10:05. Alright, that's my first half hour. Well, a little over half an hour. But that's the first chapter. So, what do we think, lads? Good so far? I'm going to take another drink. I'll make sure to move the microphone very far away this time. I really like Nick as a character. It's so funny how he describes men versus how he describes women. And, him moving away from home so he wouldn't get rumored into marrying someone. Like, he the way he describes Tom as an absolute mountain of a man, muscles straining at his shirt versus Daisy even or Miss Baker. Oh, I love it. Also, I don't know if they've mentioned it yet, but one part I find funny about this book is that when they first mention it, I believe Miss Baker is a tennis player, but when they mention a second time the sport that she's playing, it's golf, which very well maybe too. A girl is allowed to multitask, of course. I just like that it changes. Session 48 minutes. That doesn't. No, that sounds right. Well, I'm glad everyone is enjoying the story so far. I'm glad I am reaching more viewers on the first day than I was thinking. Yeah, now if everybody doesn't go to bed right now, this story's gonna go to waste, so it better be sleepy time, guys. Like, if you don't sleep after the bedtime story, then there's no point. Come on, get with it. You should be a narrator. Yes, well, I'll work on that. I don't think I could do that. Jeez, I have. Oh, another one. I'm at work. I can't sleep. All right, well, Snuggle, I have bad news. You'll just have to do it anyway. Sorry, King. I'm also taking constructive criticism on the voices I'm giving the characters. Any thoughts so far? I don't know what I'm going to do with Gatsby. I'm definitely taking suggestions for that. Anybody have a fun voice for Gatsby? Currently sleeping. Message: You're a very talented person. Sleep typing is a skill that not many can learn. Reminds me of a DM for D&D. Yeah, well, I have great news about what I was the last time I played D&D, huh? I've literally only DM'd for D&D, but I was not nearly as good at, I don't know, I was never quite great at making voices for them. Snuggle, I have bad news, but I call everybody king. This isn't a you specific thing. I'm sorry, man. Oh, I had to break it to him at some point. I would like more drinking of water during Snick's lines. I Let me have my moment. Snuggle, I will make sure to let you have your moment in the future, okay? I'm glad that you guys are enjoying the drinking water ASMR. Oh, I'm also. Do I? Bean, you wouldn't happen to know what time I get emotes, would you? I'm taking suggestions for that as well. When you get affiliate. Okay, so 50 followers. Okay, so I only have to make a few. I got 8 followers at the moment, so 42 more accounts, and then I'll be all set. There's one. Oh, I have 13 followers now. I haven't reloaded my Twitch since I opened it. I've got me open on the second monitor. You know, Pi, I am gonna feel really bad if I have to call you slutty all the time. So, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to go with Pi. I accidentally posted your link in my big game. Well, thank you for showing up, Pi. I'm afraid this is the incorrect stream. Make sure to go follow Arctic Poppy on Twitch. Poppy, I must. Well, I suppose I don't have to set up. I am less likely to have to set up a shout out on this stream, but I should do that as well. I'll have to look up one of those videos. Yeah, make sure after your league games. Yeah, Poppy, I don't have that set up. I'm sorry. I'll get right on it. So, sorry, Soup. I'll get right on it. Nightmare, nightmare, nightmare. Hey, it's bedtime. I can't talk about nightmares. Let's see. So I talked about the reading list. I am taking suggestions. I think I have a whole Discord section set up for suggestions. But so if anybody would like to give me books to read, I have, according to Twitch rules, I can only read books if they are no longer copyrighted, though I doubt Twitch checks very often. So at the moment, I've got Dracula and Gatsby, of course, on the list. So, it might take a bit to get through Gatsby. I can check how many chapters it is and give people a guess at how many nights it'll be. Oh, of course, there's no index. Let's see. Chapter 19. I've got my chapters in Roman numerals. I think it's chapter 19. So, maybe 2 weeks. Less than 2 weeks of reading. A week and a half, and we'll get through Gatsby. I can start in on a different book that somebody suggests. But we are coming up on the hour mark for this particular stream. So I think I'm going to end. I'm glad that you guys could tune in, and I'm glad that people did tune in. I hope you guys like the story. I like Gatsby. I'm reading Gatsby because Bean told me to. Well, that's not entirely true. I had Gatsby on the list. I'm moving it up so that Bean can get her Gatsby fill. I am absolutely, if you guys wish to say things about the characters and such, very Chalamet. I have no relation to that man. I don't know what you're talking about. If you guys have opinions about the characters that you'd like to voice in chat, I am all for creating a little book club, but like I said, I might not get to reading chat very often while I'm actually reading the book, just during drink breaks and also end of chapters, which at this rate seems like it's can we pay if we miss a stream, can we pay you a private session of a missed chapter? I taking you know what? Yes, you can. I have it set up to I have Twitch set up to automatically archive VODs. So if you really want to, you can go back and re-listen to this chapter. In the future, I will make sure to label the stream title as what chapter we're reading. Since it was, first day of Gatsby, I didn't worry about it. But yes, if you pay me $300, then I will come into your personal Discord server or wherever you would like, and I will read a chapter, approximately, of a book of your choice, as long as you have $300 lying around, and also I can get a copy of the book. If I have to check it out of the library or something, I will, but, it might take a bit for me to put it on hold and get it. You know how it is. You know how it is. But, yes, as we near 30 seconds till the end of stream, I am going to end it. And if you have more feedback to give, feel free to join the Discord, which I have created, and you will be able to tell me how great and amazing and cool my character voices are, and also how much you love my water drinking ASMR. So thank you everybody for tuning in, and I will hopefully see you tomorrow with chapter 2 of The Great Gatsby. Snuggle, don't call people losers, it's not very nice. Can you do Pringles ASMR? I do not have any Pringles in the house, so not right now, but I will get back to you on the Pringles ASMR. Thanks everybody for coming, and like I said, I will see you tomorrow with chapter 2. I'm gonna stop reading chat because you guys keep extending the stream and I don't want to do that. Thank you for being here. Good night, everybody. Go to sleep right now, or Timothy Chalamet will come to your house. And yeah, it'll be there.